Welcome everyone. In this week's episode of Hidden History, I will be discussing the Orphan trains and its connection to the Tartarian civilizations. When you look at history, you will discover that there are some huge events that have happened that don't seem to be mentioned. One such event is called the Orphan train movement, which was a welfare program that transported over 250,000 children, with claims the number was actually over 540,000 on locomotive carriages from crowded urban areas in the eastern United States to foster homes in the Midwest United States. It was claimed that these infants had been orphaned, abandoned, abused or homeless, when actually these were new immigrants. So where did all these infants come from? Before the orphan train movement occurred between 1864 to 1889 and became so prevalent in the United States, there were many stories at this time from the American Indian tribes who had fought against the white giants. It would suggest from the historical information that the red-haired Tartarian giants of Siberia and Northern Asia did actually settle in North America and Pacific areas in America and South America. Therefore, the vast landmass which became known as Tartaria Magna or Great Mighty Place was the location where the descendants of the white giants established their civilization alongside the Phoenician Aryans and the Scythian Aryans. There are so many Native Americans who once fought against the ancestors of Tartarian giants. Over thousands of years, the stories which the American Indian tribes mesmerized about the white giants became an integral aspect of American Indian folklore. Some of the white giants also contributed to the development of Great Tartaria in the expanses of North America. Many of the white giants had a profound awareness of the geomagnetic structure around the planet Earth and constructed ornate-looking buildings where the ley lines converged across the North American continent. Most of the white giants who inhabited the North American continent had mostly disappeared from the United States by 1728, as they knew how to navigate through the passages which had been constructed beneath North America by the Lemurians and the Atlanteans. Once the first mudflood began and partially destroyed Great Tartaria on the 8th of January 1740, and the second mudflood did the same on the 29th of October 1834, many of the Tartarian giants had already escaped. Wherefore, after the third mudflood arose on the 7th of June 1892, the Tartarian giants had to establish another civilization by using the prehistoric subterranean passages to gain access into the concealed depths below the Appalachian Mountains and the Rocky Mountains. The communities of Tartarian giants also did the same in other remote areas on planet Earth. Although this seems a bit far out, when you do the research and look at the stories, you will then realize there are some very interesting dots to connect here. And that is why there is such a fascination with this subject. Both the white giants and their descendants, the Tartarian giants, seemingly regrouped inside the hollow earth. Did the white giants and the Tartarian giants build the shimmering crystal cities, which are believed to have constructed within the hollow earth? The architecture of Great Tartaria had been extensively found in Russia, China, Taiwan and Japan, and in numerous other locations across the planet, and their buildings were constructed with geopolymer concrete, which became stronger over time, and the enormous iron and glass structures of Great Tartaria were surmounted with domes and metal needles that were used to continually absorb and transmit the atmospheric ether. Every power station of Great Tartaria, small and large, had brass pipe organs to harmonise and physically heal the Tartarian Aryans by the use of sound waves, which is now a scientific process called cymatics. The architecture of the chapels, churches and cathedrals on Earth share similar cymatic design patterns that were designed to focus and geometrically shape the sound waves to maximise the vibration and tone, so the minds of the Tartarian Aryans could easily attune into the faster resonance of the Christ consciousness. Everyone who lived in Great Tartaria was fully aware of how the constant telluric currents of planet Earth were extracted and stored in the symmetrical toroid coils of the telluric generators and electrical capacitors in their own buildings. The single toroid coils were covered with copper and positioned below the metallic towers. Alongside this, each of the massive star fortresses was constructed by the Tartarian Aryans and used to energetically regulate the distribution of fresh water and electromagnetic currents around planet Earth. All over the planet, this incredible advanced technology was utilized for the extraction of the telluric currents by the absorption of the atmospheric ether, and even today the telluric currents still accumulate in some castles and palaces and many other buildings, as such remnant structures retain the same telluric generators and electrical capacitors, even though they were no longer accessible for public usage. The various kinds of telluric generators and electrical capacitors were designed as elaborate roof grids, small window openings, the metallic ornaments in the corner of the buildings, pointed antennae, and with artistic ornaments or metallic spheres. Within different countries, invading armies that constantly fought against Great Tartaria then seized their palaces and quicksilver power stations and turned them into buildings of governance, colleges, museums, universities, banks and even tourist attractions. How this actually happened, we can only speculate. But the evidence would most certainly point towards the buildings of Great Tartaria becoming repurposed after the mud floods had occurred. Were some of the infants on the orphan trains from Great Tartaria? These infants had seemingly been accompanied to North America with their parents and were from the cultures of the Vitus Mundus, the Old World of mainland Europe. Once they arrived in the eastern United States, the infants and parents were sometimes separated, and the infants were placed in the Novus Mundus, the New World, of the elites and their secret societies. Was this done so they could be reprogrammed by them? After the destruction of Great Tartaria, did some kind of cognitive dissonance occur and cause significant psychiatric issues for millions of adult Tartarian Aryans? We have to remember that even when the orphan train movement began, the third mud flood had not yet happened and would not occur until the 7th of June 1892, which means there would have been a successive levels of the migration into North America from the urban settlements of mainland Europe, which had been extensively damaged after the destruction of Great Tartaria had arisen once the first mud flood and the second mud flood had ended. The supervised welfare program that became known as the Orphan Train movement was used to transport infants from the overcrowded urban areas of the eastern United States. Considerable overcrowding had occurred because successive levels of immigration had come into North America in a short time span, and there was not the resources to deal with the immigration problem in the eastern United States. Hence, the parentless infants of the orphan trains were taken to the foster homes across the rural areas in the Midwest United States. The various orphan trains operated between the 15th of January 1864 to the 20th of December 1889. Although this did carry on for 40 years after, in smaller numbers, during these dates around 250,000 to 320,000 parentless infants were relocated. Although many Americans believed it is more than 540,000 children were actually relocated during the Victorian period. The co-founders of the orphan train movement claimed that these infants were orphaned, abandoned, abused or homeless, but this was not always true. Were they mostly the children of the immigrants and the poor, destitute families who had escaped the destruction which the first mud flood and the second mud flood had caused in mainland Europe? A number of charitable institutions were established during this time, and these were the Children's Village, formerly known as the New York's Juvenile Asylum. The original charter for the Children's Village was officially founded on the 30th of June 1851 by 24 philanthropists led by Robert Bown Minturn, who was collectively named in the Incorporation Act of 1851. The desperate and unhappy infants were moved from eastern United States on the locomotive transporters that were labelled the orphan trains or baby trains. This relocation of parentless infants ended on the 22nd of August 1930 due to the decreased need for farm labour in the rural areas of Indiana, Michigan, Ohio and Wisconsin. Lastly, the New York Foundling was founded on the 8th of October 1869 by Sister Mary Irene Fitzgibbon and the Roman Catholic Sisters of Charity. The New York Foundling then became one of the oldest and largest child welfare agencies of New York City. Once again, in the same time frame of the Victorian period, the bizarre incubator babies were exhibited at the World's Fair called the Exhibition of the Industry of All Nations at Bryant Park in New York City. From July 1853 to November 1854. However, vast numbers of the incubator babies were also shown at other World's Fairs across mainland Europe and elsewhere on planet Earth. This activity continued right up to when the World's Fair, known as the Fremantle Industrial Exhibition, was organised in the port of Fremantle next to the Swan River of Western Australia on the 4th of October 1894. When this Pacific World's Fair ended on the 26th of April 1895, the incubator babies were then concealed from the public. The individual known as Martin Arthur Cooney was an obstetrician in the United States of America who became known as the Incubator Doctor. He established an amusement park slideshow called the Infantorium, in which Europeans, Canadians and Americans paid 25 cents to view prematurely born minors displayed as the incubator babies. Whose children were the incubator babies? Where had they originated from? How was it possible for parentless infants to be exhibited as a sideshow at the World's Fair? Nothing that we have been given as the officially crafted narrative of history is correct. Most of the immigrants who left mainland Europe for safety reasons then settled in North America. However, the immigrants could not have constructed the massive buildings in locations such as Baltimore, in Maryland and Richmond, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, alongside the numerous other urban settlements of the eastern United States that are seen in so many photographs from the Victorian period. The reason for this is because most of the urban settlements did not have industrial railroad networks, and most individuals had to use the horse and the buggy to travel around. Therefore, the evidence suggests that it is very likely the Tartarian Aryans constructed the elaborate and ornate buildings that were found by the immigrants who arrived in North America. There is so much more to this world to discover, and we only touch the surface. Remain open to possibility in this world. Thank you for watching, everybody. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next week.